She was on her knees, scrubbing the floor of a mansion she would never own, wearing a necklace she didn't know could destroy everything. He saw it the moment he walked through the door. His steps slowed. His breath caught. His entire body went still like a man who had just seen a ghost. Because that necklace. That gold necklace hanging around a poor nanny's neck. He had not seen it in 5 years. It had his name on it. And the woman wearing it? She had no idea who he was. She had no idea what that necklace meant. She had no idea that the man standing in the doorway was the father of the child she had been raising alone. But here is the question no one is asking: if she didn't know who he was, why was she trembling? And if he recognized the necklace, why did his first instinct not be anger? Why did it look like relief? Stay right here. Don't touch that screen. Because this story is not what you think it is. And by the time it's over, you will never look at a piece of jewelry the same way again. Before we continue, if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe right now, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. In my next video, I'll be picking a few new subscribers for a personal shout-out, and yours could be next. Today, I want to welcome Rodolphus Riley from Bradenton, Florida, Abel Sant Nisai from Jamaica, and Juliet from South Africa. Thank you for joining us. Subscribe now and comment below so I can easily track and welcome you too. Now, let's go back to where it all began. You already know the ending of most stories before they begin. Rich man. Poor woman. Secret. Shock. But this story. This one has layers underneath layers. Because the real question is not how did she get the necklace. The real question is, how was God working for 5 years while that necklace sat in a drawer? Why did she keep it? She could have sold it. It was gold. It had value. A woman with no job, no husband, no family, why would she hold on to a piece of jewelry belonging to a man whose face she never even saw? And why out of every street, every road, every corner of that enormous city, did the billionaire's car slow down on that particular block? On that particular afternoon? At the exact moment a little girl was running and crying. Some people call it coincidence. Others call it fate. But when you hear the full story, you might start calling it something else entirely. 3 questions. That's all I ask you to hold as we go through this. 1. Why did Isabella keep that necklace? 2. What was Kelvin really running from the night he lost it? 3. What does a little girl's love have to do with the healing of 2 broken adults? Hold those questions. Because every answer will cost you something. Isabella had never known a soft life. Not even for a season. She grew up in a house where the lights went out more often than they stayed on. Where dinner was sometimes a prayer and a glass of water. Where the word tomorrow had to be earned, never assumed. But Isabella, oh, Isabella had something that poverty could not touch. She had a smile that made strangers feel seen. She had a laugh that filled rooms. She had a will inside her, quiet, stubborn, immovable, that said, I will not be this story forever. By the time she was 24, she was sharing a one-room apartment with her best friend, Esther. 2 young women against the world. They split everything: rent, food, hope, fear. Esther was the louder one. The one who danced in the kitchen. The one who said, Isabella, stop overthinking. Just go. And Isabella was the one who worried quietly, planned carefully, and never let Esther see how scared she really was. For months, Isabella had been applying for jobs. Dozens of applications. Dozens of rejections. She would come home and sit on the edge of her bed, not crying, not complaining, just sitting. Hands folded. Eyes forward. Like she was waiting for a door to open in a wall that had no doors. Esther would watch her from across the room and feel her own heart squeeze. One day, my story will change, Isabella always said. Not if. Not maybe. One day. And then one bright Tuesday morning, it did. She got the interview call. A hotel downtown. Entry level. Modest pay. But it was something. It was a door. Esther nearly knocked the ceiling off with excitement. She prayed over Isabella while she dressed. Smoothed her collar. Looked her in the eyes and said, go and shine. I know you'll get this. Isabella walked into that interview with quiet dignity and walked out with a job. She stood on the sidewalk outside the hotel and let the tears fall, finally. Happy tears. Relief tears. Years of effort tears. When she got home, Esther was already at the door. One look at Isabella's face and they both started screaming. That night, Esther said, "We have to celebrate." Isabella hesitated. She was a practical woman. Celebrations cost money they didn't really have. And she had already begun calculating her first paycheck, how much for rent, how much for food, how much she could save. But Esther was already pulling clothes out of the wardrobe. Just one night, Isabella. One night. You deserve it. And Isabella, for the first time in a very long time, let herself say yes. She didn't know that yes would change everything. She didn't know that one night of joy would lead to years of pain and eventually to a miracle she never could have planned. At that same moment, on the other side of the city, a man sat alone in a car. Engine running. Lights off. Tears on his face. His name was Kelvin Williams. 33 years old. A self-made businessman. The kind of man who walked into rooms and the room changed. Sharp mind. Handsome face. Everything the world calls success. But that night, Kelvin Williams was not successful. He was devastated. His business partner, a man he had trusted for 7 years, had just been caught stealing. Not a small amount. Millions. Company funds. Employee pensions. Contracts. Gone. And the worst part? The man had run. Just disappeared. Left Kelvin to face the clients, the board, the press, the legal teams. Left him to sit in that car, in the dark, and absorb the weight of a betrayal that had his fingerprints all over it, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he'd trusted too deeply. Kelvin had always believed in people. It was both his greatest strength and his most dangerous vulnerability. He believed that if you treated people right, they would treat you right. He believed in loyalty. And that night, loyalty had been ripped from him like a rib from his chest. He drove. He didn't know where he was going. He just drove until the city lights blurred and the road became the only thing holding him. He ended up at a club. Not because he was the kind of man who clubbed, he wasn't. But because he needed noise. He needed something louder than the voice inside his head saying, "You trusted the wrong person." Again. He ordered a drink. Then another. And another. He didn't notice the time passing. He didn't notice how full the room had become. He didn't notice a young woman in a simple black dress walk past him, a woman with headache medication in her bloodstream and dizziness pulling at her eyelids. He didn't notice any of it. Because grief has a way of making everything else disappear. Two people. Both broken in different ways. Both searching for something they couldn't name. And in a single night, without intention, without clarity, without even seeing each other's faces, their lives became permanently, irreversibly, woven. Isabella found the room by accident. That's the part people sometimes struggle to accept. They want there to be an intention. A choice. A plan. But there was none. She was dizzy. The medication she'd taken for her headache had mixed badly with the noise, the heat, the crowd. She needed to sit down. She needed quiet. She saw a door half open on the upper floor of the hotel above the club. Dark inside. Quiet. She walked in. She lay down. Sleep took her before she could form a single thought. And Kelvin, barely walking, supported by the men he'd come with, was brought to that room. That room. Out of dozens. I want you to sit with the weight of that for a moment. Not because what happened next was right, it wasn't. Not because either of them chose it, they didn't. But because sometimes, the things that shape our entire futures are not the things we plan. They are the things that happen in the dark, when we are at our weakest, when our guards are completely down. The next morning, Isabella woke slowly. Her head was still heavy. The room was silent. And she was alone. She sat up. And then reality arrived like cold water. She didn't know where she was. She didn't know how she'd gotten there. She didn't know what had happened. Her hands trembled as she straightened her clothes. Her eyes swept the room, unfamiliar, expensive, not hers. And then she saw it. On the pillow beside her. A gold necklace. Delicate. heavy with meaning. A name engraved on it in elegant script, K. Williams. She picked it up. She didn't know why. She didn't know whose it was. She didn't know what it meant. But something inside her, some quiet, instinctive part of her, said, "Hold this. Don't let go of this." She tucked it into her bag. She also noticed money on the table. A small amount left carelessly, like an afterthought. Tears flooded her eyes so fast she couldn't stop them. She pressed her hands to her face and stood very still. "What happened to me?" she whispered. No one answered. She walked home in the early morning light. She didn't tell Esther right away. She just walked in and held her like a child and cried without explanation. Esther held her back, asking nothing, giving everything. 1 month later, the truth arrived in the form of a clinic nurse with a gentle smile. "Congratulations. You are 1 month pregnant." Isabella sat in the plastic chair in that small clinic and felt the world rearrange itself around her. Not slowly. All at once. She walked home. She sat on the floor. And she cried the way people cry when there are no more words, just sound. Just grief. Just the raw, helpless acknowledgement that life has taken a turn you cannot undo. "I'm going to have a baby," she whispered over and over. "But I don't even know his name. I didn't see his face. I don't know who he is." She placed her hand on her flat stomach. "And made a decision that would define the next 5 years of her life. I will raise this child. Alone if I have to. I will not give up." But that wasn't even the hardest part. The hardest part was what came next. Esther sat beside her on that floor and held both her hands. They talked for hours. And Esther, practical, fierce, loving Esther, said, "We are not sitting here doing nothing. We go back to that club. Someone saw something." Isabella looked unsure. "It's been a month, Esther. We can try," Esther said firmly. "We won't sit here doing nothing." The next day, they went. The club was quiet in the afternoon, lights off, cleaners moving through with mops. The glamour of night replaced by the tired ordinariness of day. They showed the necklace to the manager. He shook his head. They asked 2 staff members. Nothing. A cleaner. A bartender. A security guard. No one remembered a man. No one knew the name K. Williams. Isabella walked out of that club with her best friend's hand in hers and looked down at the street. "No one knows him," she whispered. Esther squeezed her hand. "Don't give up." But how do you not give up when you are carrying a child whose father doesn't know you exist? When you have no job security, no family, no savings? When the only evidence of what happened is a gold necklace in your bag and a heartbeat growing inside you that you never planned for? Isabella looked up at the sky. She had no answer. But she had something. She had herself. And she decided, quietly, stubbornly, completely, that that would have to be enough. The pregnancy was not kind to Isabella's body. The nausea came in waves. The dizziness she had first blamed on stress turned out to be a companion she hadn't asked for, showing up every morning without fail. She went to work. She tried. She stood behind the hotel desk with her eyes open even when her body screamed to close them. She cleaned rooms with shaking hands. She carried trays when her legs felt like water. She told no one. She couldn't afford the conversation. She couldn't afford the pity, the judgment, the whispers. So she smiled. She nodded. She said, "Good morning, sir. Welcome. Can I help you?" And inside she fought. But the body is honest in ways the mind is not. One afternoon, she sat down on a guest's bed to rest for just a moment, and sleep took her before she could stop it. She woke to a guest standing over her, horrified. The manager called her in. His face said everything before his mouth did. "Isabella, what is going on with you?" She tried to explain. She tried to apologize. But he was already shaking his head. This hotel cannot keep someone who is not fit to work. She sat on a cement bench outside the hotel. Her bag in her lap. Her job, gone. Her only income, gone. And in her stomach, a child who would soon need food, and clothing, and a life. She didn't scream. She didn't fall apart in public. She sat very still, the way Isabella always did when the pain was too big for noise, and she breathed. When she got home, Esther took one look at her and gasped. "What happened?" "I was fired." Esther's arms were around her before another word was said. "You're not alone. We will figure this out." They did figure it out, barely, painfully, one day at a time. Esther helped cover rent for the months Isabella couldn't work. Isabella found small jobs cleaning private homes, doing laundry, anything that allowed her to sit or move at her own pace. And then Vera arrived. The first time Isabella held her daughter, she felt something shift inside her chest. Something that had been crooked, straightened. Something that had been loud, went quiet. Vera was impossibly small. Impossibly perfect. Dark eyes that looked like they already understood something about the world. Soft, curly hair. A little grip that wrapped around Isabella's finger like it never intended to let go. Isabella looked at her daughter and made the same promise she had made months ago on a clinic chair, only now it had a face. "I will give you everything. I will fight for you. I will never let you feel what I felt." The years that followed were not easy. But they were full. Full of scraped-together dinners that somehow tasted like joy. Full of bath-time laughter and bedtime stories and Vera's questions, endless, beautiful, exhausting questions. "Mommy, why is the sky blue? Mommy, do butterflies have feelings? Mommy, why do some kids have daddies and I don't?" That last question always found the bruise. Isabella never lied to her daughter. She also never told her the full truth, because the full truth was a woman asleep in a stranger's hotel room, and a necklace on a pillow, and a man whose face she never saw. So she found the middle ground that love invents when honesty feels cruel. She reached into the top drawer of her small cabinet. And she brought out the necklace. "This belonged to your daddy," she said softly. Vera's eyes went wide. "Really?" "Yes. This is the only thing he left behind. I don't know his name or where he is. But this necklace reminds me of him. And now it will remind you too." Vera touched it with two small fingers. Gently. The way children touch things they sense are sacred. "So this is my daddy's necklace?" "Yes, my baby." Isabella placed it around Vera's neck. It was too big for her, it hung almost to her chest. But Vera stood straighter the moment it settled there. "I'll always wear it, Mommy. I won't miss my daddy anymore because I have his necklace." Isabella hugged her daughter and cried. Not from sadness. From something more complicated than sadness. From the love of a mother who had carried a secret for 5 years. From the grace of a child who had turned that secret into treasure. Meanwhile, across the city, in a world that could not have been more different, Kelvin Williams sat on the balcony of his mansion and stared at the horizon. He was 38 now. Wealthier. More respected. His company had recovered fully from the betrayal years ago, rebuilt brick by brick through his discipline and refusal to quit. He had everything the world offered. He had his father's approval. He had Tricia, beautiful, polished, ambitious Tricia, on his arm at every event. He had houses. Cars. Influence. And he had, that feeling. That hollow, persistent, inexplicable feeling. Like a room in his chest with the furniture removed. His father had noticed. One evening, over tea on the balcony, the old man set down his cup and said, "Son. When are you going to settle down?" Kelvin smiled faintly. "Soon, Dad. I've been thinking about it. Tricia is a good woman." "Yes, she is." "Then marry her. Start a family. That emptiness you carry, a family will fill it." Kelvin stared into the sky. "I hope so, Dad." But even as he said it, something in him didn't quite believe it. Because the emptiness he felt was not the kind that a ring fixes. It was the kind that has a name, and the name just hadn't arrived yet. Across town, Tricia sat in her best friend Cynthia's living room, glass of juice in hand, and made a plan. She wanted to be Mrs. Williams. She had wanted it for 2 years. But Kelvin kept delaying. Kept going quiet. Kept looking at something in the distance that she couldn't reach. "Cynthia, what do I do?" Cynthia, confident, calculated Cynthia, smiled and held up her engagement ring. "You want to know how I got this ring? Tell me." "I told him I was pregnant." Tricia's eyes went wide. "Were you?" "No. There was a long silence. Tricia stared at the ring. At the door. At the life she wanted, the mansion, the title, the security. What if he finds out? By then, you'll already be engaged. Cry. Say you lost it. He'll feel sorry for you. Tricia said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, okay. I'll do it. And somewhere across town, Vera skipped through a small room, her daddy's necklace bouncing on her chest, completely unaware that a woman she had never met was about to tell a lie that would put her father on a path toward the truth. Tricia arrived at the Williams mansion in her best dress. She had rehearsed it 100 times in the mirror. The hesitation. The vulnerability. The hand on the stomach. And Kelvin, warm, open-hearted Kelvin, fell for every note of it. I'm pregnant. The joy on his face broke something in Tricia she hadn't expected. He lifted her off the ground. He spun her. He pressed his forehead to hers and said, "We're having a baby," like it was the holiest sentence he had ever spoken. And Tricia smiled. And felt the guilt settle into her like a stone. Kelvin called his father that same night. Chief Williams laughed out loud, the kind of laugh that fills a house. Finally. My son is becoming a man. We go to her parents. We do this properly. Wedding plans began. Rings were discussed. Dates were floated. The mansion was being imagined as a family home. But Kelvin still felt it. That thing. That quiet, persistent missing. Even in the excitement, even with the prospect of marriage and fatherhood, it sat there in his chest like a question without a question mark. He tried to ignore it. He did what successful men do, he kept moving. He filled his calendar. He closed deals. He smiled in photographs. 3 weeks later, he was in the back of his car, heading to a site inspection, when his driver took a different route through a part of the city he rarely visited. Narrow streets. Small houses. Clothes hanging from ropes. Kelvin looked out the window, not really seeing. And then, the sudden, sharp cry of a child. He sat up. A little girl was running along the sidewalk. Crying. Holding something tightly in her hand. People passing by glanced at her and kept walking. But Kelvin didn't keep driving. He didn't know why. Something about this child, the tears, the determination, the way she ran like she was carrying the weight of someone else's need, hit him somewhere deep and wordless. "Stop the car," he said. The driver hesitated. "Stop the car. Now." He was out the door before it fully stopped. He jogged after her. "Hey. Hey, baby. Stop." She turned. And Kelvin, for the first time in years, felt his heart do something it had not done in a very long time. It broke open. Not from pain. From recognition. He couldn't explain it. He had never seen this child before in his life. But looking at her face, her red eyes, her stubborn little chin, the way she stood her ground even while crying, he felt something like memory. He knelt down in front of her. "Why are you crying?" "My mommy is sick," she said, her voice small but certain. "I'm going to buy her medicine." Kelvin looked at her closely. And then his eyes fell to her neck. Gold. A gold necklace. His family name, K. Williams, engraved on it in a script he would recognize anywhere. Because it was the same script he had ordered himself. Because it was his necklace. The one that had gone missing 5 years ago. The one he had searched for. The one he had eventually stopped looking for. He pointed at it with a trembling hand. Where did you get this?" The girl took a step back. "Don't touch it," she said firmly. "My mommy said I can't let anyone touch my daddy's necklace." Kelvin stared at her. "Your daddy's necklace?" "Yes. Mommy said it's the only thing my daddy left." Kelvin's chest tightened. His hands were shaking. He looked at this child, her eyes, her hair, the stubborn set of her small jaw, and the world around him went very, very quiet. "What is your mommy's name?" he asked carefully. "Isabella. My mommy is Isabella. She's very sick. Take me to her," he said. And the little girl, who did not know who this man was, who only knew that he had kind eyes and he had promised to help with her mother's medicine, took his hand and led him home. The room was small. One mattress. One window. One small cabinet. Peeling walls that had seen better years. Kelvin stepped through the door and his eyes adjusted to the dim light. And there she was. Isabella. Lying on a mat on the floor. Pale. Sweating. Her breath shallow. He walked to her slowly. "Are you Isabella?" She turned her head. Looked at him. Something crossed her face, that flicker of almost recognition that the mind dismisses when it seems impossible. "Yes." "Who are you?" "I saw your daughter on the road. I couldn't leave her." He helped her sit up. He passed her water. He called his driver for the medicine. He stayed. Isabella was too weak to ask questions. Too tired to do anything but accept the help. Later, when the medicine had begun its work, when the color had begun to return to her face, she looked at him properly. "Thank you. I don't know who you are, but thank you." Kelvin looked at Vera. The girl was curled against her mother now, the necklace still on her chest. Then he looked back at Isabella. "I don't want to be rude," he said carefully. "But the necklace your daughter is wearing, where did it come from?" Isabella was quiet for a moment. She looked at her daughter. Then she looked at the man sitting across from her. "It all started about 5 years ago," she said slowly. And she told him. She told him about the job. The celebration. The club. The dizziness. The strange room. Waking alone. Finding the necklace on the pillow. She told him about the clinic. The pregnancy. The decision to keep the baby. The years alone. "I kept the necklace because I didn't know anything else," she said, her voice breaking at the edges. "When Vera started asking about her father, I placed it around her neck and told her it was the only thing her father left behind." She looked up. "Why are you asking? Do you know it?" Kelvin was very still. His hands were folded in his lap. His eyes were fixed on the necklace around Vera's neck. When he spoke, his voice was low. Controlled. But underneath it, something raw. "That necklace is mine." Isabella froze. The air in the room changed. "What?" she whispered. "I lost it 5 years ago," Kelvin said. "I went to Vortex Club that night. I was going through something. I drank too much. My people brought me to a hotel room." He looked her in the eyes. "When I got there, you were already on the bed. I thought. I wasn't in my right mind. I thought someone had arranged for you to be there. I didn't think. I didn't ask. I was broken and I was drunk and I was wrong. The next morning you were gone. The necklace was gone. I didn't remember clearly. I tried to forget that night. And I moved on, not knowing. Not imagining for a single moment that." He looked at Vera. Vera looked back at him with those enormous eyes. "I'm so sorry, Isabella." Isabella covered her mouth with both hands. Tears came so fast she couldn't stop them. "You were there. That was you?" "Yes. 5 years," she whispered. 5 years. Alone. I didn't even know your name." "I know. I lost my job because of the pregnancy. I couldn't find you. I looked. Esther and I went back to the club and nobody could tell us anything." "I know." Kelvin's voice broke. "Just slightly. I can't change that. I can't give you back those 5 years." Vera, who had been listening to all of this with the quiet intensity of children who understand more than adults think they do, looked at the man sitting across from her mother. She looked at the necklace on her chest. She looked at him again. "Are you my daddy?" Kelvin looked at the little girl. His throat worked. His eyes were bright. "Yes," he said. "I think I am." Vera tilted her head. Studied him for a long moment. And then, with the certainty that only children possess, she climbed off the mat, walked the 3 steps across the small room, and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Kelvin Williams, billionaire, businessman, man who had rebuilt empires from ruin, could not speak. He held his daughter for the first time. And the hollow room in his chest, filled. Isabella watched. Her tears fell silently. Not from sadness. Not anymore. You know that feeling when a puzzle piece you've been searching for, clicks? Not just a small click. A deep one. The kind that rearranges something fundamental. That is what happened in that small room, with peeling walls and thin mattresses and one gold necklace, between a billionaire who had lost himself, a woman who had carried everything alone, and a little girl who had been wearing the answer around her neck for 4 years. "Come with me," Kelvin said. Isabella looked up. "Both of you. Come to my home. Let me take care of you. Let me be a father to her." Isabella stared at him. The room was quiet. Vera was still holding Kelvin's hand, looking up at her mother with those wide eyes. Isabella was not a woman who trusted easily. She had been let down by life too many times to fall for warmth at first sight. But this was not a stranger offering her charity. This was the father of her daughter, a man who had not known, who was not running, who was here. She looked at the necklace on her daughter's neck. She looked at Kelvin's face. And she said yes. The black SUV pulled into the driveway of the Williams mansion that evening. The security guard's jaw dropped. Vera gasped and pressed her nose to the car window. "Mommy, is this a palace?" Kelvin smiled quietly. "This is your home now." Inside, Isabella moved carefully, touching nothing, taking up as little space as possible. She was not a woman comfortable with grandeur. She was a woman who had learned to make peace with small rooms. Vera had no such hesitation. She ran down the hall. She bounced on the rug. She found the kitchen and pressed her face against the glass cabinet. "Daddy, can I eat that?" The word "daddy" came out so naturally, so easily, that Kelvin stopped moving for a full second. "Yes," he said softly. "You can eat anything you want." He left for work that afternoon. But not before picking up Vera, spinning her once, kissing her forehead, and saying, "Be a good girl. Daddy will be back." Isabella watched from the doorway and pressed her hand to her mouth. The peace lasted 3 hours. A black car pulled into the driveway. Tricia. She walked in on heels, designer bag in hand, and stopped dead when she saw Isabella standing by the dining table and a little girl playing with a doll on the floor. Her eyes narrowed. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Isabella turned, startled. "Mr. Kelvin invited me. He brought us here. Leave. Now. Please, Ma. Don't send us out." Tricia didn't wait. She moved forward. She shoved. And little Vera, the girl who had been wearing that necklace like a crown, slipped from her mother's arms and fell. Her face hit the sharp edge of the gate. She cried out. "Mommy, my face." Isabella lifted her daughter with shaking hands. Blood on the small cheek. Vera whimpering. Tricia stood at the door, arms crossed, unmoved. That's what happens when you trespass where you don't belong. She walked inside. The door slammed. Isabella sat outside the gate with her injured daughter in her lap. No food. No shade. The sun hot and indifferent. She pressed a piece of cloth to Vera's cheek and rocked her gently. Hours passed. Then, headlights. Kelvin's car. He saw them before the gate was even open. He was out of the car before it fully stopped. What happened? Isabella's voice trembled as she told him. The look on Kelvin's face was something Isabella had never seen before. Not anger. Something beyond anger. Something cold and certain and final. He helped them inside. And then he found Tricia. The conversation in Kelvin's bedroom was not long. But it was complete. "That little girl is my daughter," he said. "My blood. And you starved her, pushed her, and injured her." Tricia's mouth fell open. "But I'm pregnant for you. And that gives you the right to harm a child." Tricia had no answer. "Don't ever touch them again," Kelvin said. "Don't go near Vera. This is the only time I will say it." He walked out. And Tricia, standing in a room full of beautiful things, with a pregnancy lie sitting like rot in her chest, felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had come to this mansion to secure a future. But she had just spent whatever credit she had left. The next morning, Kelvin sat across from her in the living room. He looked calm. "I've been thinking," he said. "Do you know why I never proposed? Why I kept delaying?" Tricia shook her head. "Because I wasn't sure. Because something inside me kept saying, this isn't right. This isn't complete." He looked out the window. Isabella and Vera were in the garden. Vera had found a watering can. She was watering flowers with absolute seriousness, narrating her process to herself. Isabella was laughing. Kelvin turned back to Trisha. Now I know what I was missing. Trisha's lip trembled. My heart belongs to them. Not because I planned it. Not because it makes sense on paper. Because when I am near them, the empty room in my chest is full. I wish you well, Trisha. I truly do. He stood. He walked away. And Trisha, who had planned so carefully, calculated so precisely, performed so convincingly, sat alone in a mansion that had never really been hers and wept. Not for Kelvin. But for the version of herself she had sacrificed in trying to keep him. Some lessons are expensive. And the most expensive ones always involve pretending to be something you are not. The weeks that followed were quiet in the way that real healing is always quiet. Not dramatic. Not sudden. Just steadier. Each day a little more settled than the one before. Kelvin took a DNA test. Not because he doubted, he had looked in Vera's eyes and known. But because he wanted the paperwork. He wanted Vera's name to carry his legally, officially, completely. The results confirmed what the necklace had already told him. He sat Vera down and showed her the paper. She looked at it seriously. Does this mean you're really my daddy? Yes, baby. Like, for always. For always. She considered this. Then, okay. But I'm keeping the necklace. Kelvin laughed a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep. The necklace is yours. It always was. Isabella and Kelvin were not a fairy tale. Let me be honest with you about that. There was no grand romantic moment. There was no instant love story. There was something more real, more complicated, more human than that. There were conversations that were hard to have. Apologies that had to be said more than once before they fully landed. Moments where Isabella looked at this man in his enormous house and felt the distance between their worlds like a physical thing. Moments where Kelvin watched her move through his life with such grace, such quiet strength, and felt the full weight of what had been lost. But they had something that most people never find. They had Vera. A child who loved them both completely, without conditions, without resentment, without the baggage of the past. And in loving her, they began, slowly, honestly, carefully, to find each other. Chief Williams, the old man who had simply wanted his son to settle down, came to visit one afternoon and found Vera asleep in his lap before dinner was finished. He looked at her face. He looked at his son. And he said nothing for a long time. Then, she has your mother's eyes. Kelvin looked at his daughter. I know, Dad. That evening, on the balcony, the same balcony where the old man had once asked his son why he felt empty, they sat in comfortable silence. And for the first time in years, Kelvin felt nothing missing. Here is the truth this story is trying to tell you. Not the romantic version. The real version. Love cannot be forced. Not with lies. Not with manipulation. Not with pregnancy tests faked or timed confessions engineered to produce a desired response. Real love is not a trap you set. Real love is a truth you stumble into, usually when you're too tired to pretend, too broken to perform, too empty to keep faking. Kelvin was not healed by ambition or marriage or strategy. He was healed by a little girl in dusty slippers, crying on a sidewalk, clutching medicine money and refusing to let a stranger touch her daddy's necklace. Isabella was not rescued by a rich man. She was recognized. After 5 years of carrying everything alone, being seen was more powerful than any rescue. And Vera. Vera, who had worn that necklace for 4 years. Who had told her friends at school, I have a daddy too, and this is his necklace. Who had watered it with her belief, and her love, and her child's complete and unconditional faith. Vera was the reason the truth finally arrived. Sometimes the answer to a prayer is not a miracle. Sometimes it is a gold necklace around a little girl's neck, swinging as she runs down a street, catching the eye of the one man in the world who would recognize it. Do you remember what you saw at the very beginning of this story? A billionaire. A poor nanny. A gold necklace. A man whose steps slowed. Whose breath caught. Whose whole body went still. You thought it was shock. You thought it was anger, maybe. Or the beginning of a confrontation. But now you understand what that expression really was. It was recognition. Not just of a necklace. Of a feeling he had been carrying for 5 years, that persistent, wordless sense of something missing, finally finding its name. He looked at that necklace around a poor nanny's neck, and for the first time in 5 years, he felt complete. The necklace was never just jewelry. It was a thread. Pulled across 5 years, 2 broken lives, 1 determined child. A thread that, when finally followed to its end, led everyone home. Stories like this don't just entertain us. They remind us of something we already know but sometimes forget. That the things we lose are not always gone. That the children watching us are listening to more than our words. That truth, real truth, does not disappear just because it is inconvenient. It waits. It waits in a drawer. Around a small neck. In a pair of eyes that look too familiar. It waits until we are ready. And then it finds us. So tell me, watching this right now, is there something in your life that feels missing? Something you have looked for and given up on? Something you sense is still out there, waiting for the right moment? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, if it reached somewhere inside you that needed reaching, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because that's what stories are for. Not just to entertain. To remind us who we are.